Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our latest school meeting. Great to see so many of you here. It's hard to believe it's 6 months since we started on this journey. A huge amount of work has been done in that time. Firstly, to complete last year, and then all the work planning and preparing for the coming year. Teacher training colleagues have been teaching for 2 weeks now, and as I was wandering around HBS earlier today, I ran into a number of planning colleagues who are here for undergraduate induction for the planners. And I guess for most of us, 5 days from now, when undergraduate teaching kicks off, is kind of the real marker for the starting point of the term. Delivering the teaching that we're going to do this year in a blended manner safely has required thinking through very carefully everything that we do. You will have seen a huge amount of communication coming out around that, a large number of documents to read. Lorna has been doing a fantastic job of summarising some of that for us in the Friday messages, but a lot of this is changing by the day. There's a huge amount to digest. And so we thought, as we did at the beginning of lockdown, it's probably useful to come together as a school to discuss any issues that are arising around our return to campus, the beginning of teaching, induction, the start of a new academic year. So this is an opportunity to raise issues, to ask questions. The school leadership team has spent many hours on this over the past weeks and months. We'll aim to answer any questions you've got. Anything that we can't answer today, we'll make sure that we get an answer to that and try to disseminate it. But I mean, SEED has been addressing these challenges from the beginning collectively, and so hopefully today we can draw again on that collective wisdom to make sure that when we kick off on Monday morning, we're doing that in the best way that we can. So most of this will be Q&A. We're not going to talk at you too much, but I'm going to start off by handing over to Kay, who's going to talk us through some of the key issues around campus reopening and the safe return to campus. Okay.
Thank you, Martin. Yes, so first of all, just to remind everybody, what we are doing is recording the meeting, as Lorna has just indicated in the chat. Just so we can keep a track of any questions as well that we might run out of time for. So what I want to do is first of all focus on because of some of the questions we've received in relation to returning to campus, etc. Is just give an update on where we are from a school perspective in relation to making our school buildings COVID secure as much as we're able, and hopefully this will offer reassurance. And provide some more detail in the whole tsunami of information we're getting thrown at us at the moment. We will be distributing these slides that I'm about to show, just a few slides in our Friday message, so I'm hoping you find that helpful as well. So first of all, just to emphasise that our whole approach from a university perspective, not just a school perspective, is to make our buildings safe. Our whole approach to this is a safety culture, to be aware of our responsibilities as individuals, for using hand sanitizers, for wearing face coverings, etc., and for being aware of what's happening around us at any particular time. Now, first of all, I also do want to thank Linda Rowlingson and John Moore in particular as well for all the extensive work they've put into making our rooms in our buildings COVID secure, but also to Kelly Osgood and to Lorna Pontefract as well, who are also on our school campus reopening group. So first of all, just bear with me whilst I open my slides. Hopefully you should be able to see some of the slides that I'll very quickly run through now because I don't want to take up too much time, but just to summarise the key areas that we've set up within the school. So as you will be aware from many messages, but also from our Friday messages, Each member of staff and each student in the school will be issued with 2 washable face coverings. And staff can collect those from Seed School office as well when they are on campus to do so. So please don't feel pressure to come into campus to collect them unless you need to be on campus. Again, the whole focus on campus reopening is that you continue to work at home unless you are required to come into work. Everybody who, and that's teaching staff and students, who is able to wear a face covering should do so in all university communal areas and teaching rooms, as well as maintaining that 2-metre distance. Some staff and students we appreciate may be exempt from wearing face coverings for health or disability grounds, and we need to acknowledge that and appreciate that. A visor should not be used in place of a face covering. I think there's been some investigations into the fact that face coverings are safer than a visor. So the whole approach from a university perspective is to use face coverings. You may wish to remind students at the start of any teaching session that they should wear a face covering if they are able to do so. Now, in relation to our teaching rooms in all of our school buildings, all the teaching rooms have been laid out with a 2-metre distancing within there. So John, Linda and myself, to a certain degree as well, have been around with that 2-metre stick to make sure that our teaching rooms have been set up securely. It is important, please, if you are teaching in any of the rooms, that you do not move any seats or furniture. They have been specifically laid out to ensure that we adhere to a 2 metres. At the start of the session, we ask the teaching staff as well to check the timetabled numbers that they should have in that teaching space, and the number of students in the room should match that. If for any reason there are more individuals in that room than should be, then please stop teaching there and make sure that you can either reschedule accordingly, or you ask certain individuals who shouldn't be there to leave the room. Each classroom has a notice on the door and inside the room to show maximum occupancy of that room according to 2-metre safety measures. So please do pay attention to that maximum occupancy. Before entering into the teaching space as well, please do hold the door open if you can to avoid any touch points from students as they enter into the room, except obviously if it's a fire door as such. But please do try and keep doors open where you can, and windows as well should be opened to optimise ventilation. And please encourage students to use all entrances and exits when they're entering and leaving the room as well, to avoid queuing and to maintain the 2-metre distance. Please ask the students as well to fill the room from the back or the front, depending on where the entrance is, to ensure that students aren't passing each other as they enter to get to an available seat as well within your teaching space. Students can move around as long as social distancing is maintained and face coverings are worn within the room. From a cleaning perspective, again, just to emphasise, we all have a role to play in making sure that we clean any areas that we've been in ourselves. So from each teaching room as well, we'll have a poster displaying instructions on cleaning touch points. Estates will be cleaning touch points and door handles, light switches, desks and chairs, teaching lecterns every morning. And a scheduled programme using misting as such, as it's called, which is long-acting antivirus, will be used in certain areas as well, in certain teaching spaces. A reminder to all teachers that obviously nobody's expecting anyone to clean a room from top to bottom, but we are expecting you to pay attention to cleaning the lectern where you have touched any particular surface and any equipment you may have used. And there will be wipes available in all teaching spaces to do this. So please do use those wipes where possible or at all times. Teachers or students are not expected to clean surfaces used by students as well. So just focus on your own particular areas. Students will also have access to wipes as they need them. And in communal areas, wipes will also be provided as well for students to wipe down any equipment or anything like that before or after use. Ventilation, I'm not going to spend too long on this at all. There is a link here that you'll be able to look at, and the information has been sent out before. But obviously from an air conditioning perspective, the risk of spreading coronavirus is extremely low, as long as there's adequate supply of fresh air and ventilation. So estates have spent significant time and effort to ensure that we are set up to be optimised for ventilation as much as possible. The crucial slide that I do want to focus on, because there's been lots of questions about this, is the reporting of cases of COVID for staff and for students. This is, as Martin says, with many aspects at the moment, it's an evolving process. Things are developing and moving at pace. To reassure people from a school perspective, we are on top of any reporting from students or staff, and we have systems in place. Kelly will be confirming this certainly from the student perspective in a few minutes, and emphasising about the student support teams there. I think the key thing to mention about this is that it's everyone's responsibility to keep our campus COVID secure, and we can protect each other whilst at work, and also protect the NHS as well. So from a staff perspective, if you are a staff member who tests positive or you are self-isolating, you must immediately report this to your line manager. Your line manager must then immediately report that through the e-form that we have at the university. I won't link through to that, but obviously from the slides, or you may have viewed it already, there is a form, an online form that is relatively straightforward to complete and to submit. To ensure as well that we understand what's happening at the local level for staff cases of self-isolation or positive tests, can I also ask that you also inform me as head of school operations, just so I can have a general oversight of what's happening at school level very quickly. We will receive information back from the Campus Life team for anything that's reported, but it will help me and SLT to understand the situation very quickly and to respond accordingly. From a student perspective, if you become aware of a student who tests positive or has self-isolated, you must instruct the student to immediately report this to their student support team, and Kelly can emphasise that in a bit more detail in a few minutes. If they are in halls, they must also report to their duty Res Life advisor as well. And these individuals or these teams will then immediately report that through the through the online process as well. Now, once those submission forms have been sent through to the Division of Campus Life, there's an involvement there with Public Health England, and there will be a coordinated response there to the staff member or to the student, and it will also allow us to subsequently deal with anything on campus as well, such as closing teaching room space, etc. And all information that is gathered through that process will support NHS test and trace with contact tracing. The other thing to remind people of that's not on this slide actually is about the NHS app as well, that many of you hopefully will have downloaded to your mobile phones already. We strongly advise everybody to do that where you're able to, and to use that app where you can. It's a very informative way, hopefully, of helping us manage the situation. So that's just a few summary slides. I didn't want to bombard everyone with lots of slides at the moment, and hopefully that will have answered some of the questions that have been submitted. But obviously in due course we can pick up more questions as we carry on talking through things. What I'd like to do is just hand over to Kelly, who can add some more information around the student reporting as well, and how she's going to use her teams as well to optimise that and support academic staff.
Thanks, Kay. So as Kay's just mentioned, there is a university procedure for students reporting, but as an additional measure, we've also put into place a SEED procedure to support that. So what we've put into place is that if you do hear of any students that are reporting or they get in touch with you, we suggest that they contact the SEED email address as soon as possible. We can circulate all the details after this meeting so that we'll submit the form on your behalf and the students' behalf, and we'll make sure we log those cases as well, so we have follow-up. That also gives us the opportunity to allow some welfare support from Janice's team. So when we log those cases, Janice will also do a follow-up with those students to make sure they're okay. You know, they're getting the support they need, they're getting the support in halls if they're self-isolating. So the other thing that I also wanted to reiterate is that we can't ourselves tell students to self-isolate. So if you do hear of a student that has symptoms or has tested positive, or what we need you to do is really get them to look at the NHS guidance, but don't tell them to self-isolate. That has to be a decision that they make themselves. I should also let staff know that there's a series of FAQs on StaffNet. You've probably seen them already, but if you do have any questions from students, you can direct them to the questions on there about residences, about safety, things like that, and that's the first point of call, really. Like I said, we'll provide a follow-up from the student support team. We've also got drop-in sessions. Janice's team is always available if any students have any concerns about missing teaching, or whether they think, you know, they've got concerns about not being able to come on campus. Also, I had in the questions that were submitted in advance, we have had some queries about students that are on the architecture programmes, which is a joint programme with MMU, and obviously they're in a different situation from us at the moment. So rather timely, I have meetings with colleagues at MMU tomorrow and on Thursday, and I'm going to try and put together a process for how we deal with those students. But at the moment, the advice that I would give is that students need to report to both institutions. If the students have queries about the halls of residence, there is a number that they can call, and that is on the FAQs, and I can circulate that afterwards. It's the Res Life number. But I will try and coordinate with colleagues tomorrow with MMU and come up with a procedure that I can circulate to architecture staff. I think that was it at the moment. As I said, I'll try and get all of the information together, and maybe we can put it in Lorna's bulletin on Friday as well.
Thanks, Kelly. Shall we just take a couple of those questions quickly that have come through the chat in relation to this before we move on to Laura, who's going to cover some PGR provision. Just in relation to Joanne Tippett, who's asked a question about, can a generic risk assessment for handing out materials be shared so we can all use this and adapt it? Thank you, Joanne, for reminding us about the risk assessments. We will be putting out information very soon, hopefully by the end of today, if not tomorrow, in relation to all our school risk assessments, which will be viewable from StaffNet. So we will have information on there. We strongly recommend that everybody looks at any relevant risk assessments that have been prepared, whether they are bespoke ones for example, the geography labs, or generic teaching risk assessments. It's worth pointing out that the 4 T&L generic risk assessments that have been released have been adopted fully by the school and have been updated actually according to school requirements, and they will also be on StaffNet as well. In relation to handing out of materials, I don't think any materials, I think there is instructions about that, and no materials should be handed out for teaching purposes. I don't know whether you want to add anything, Martin, to that.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I was going to say that, and therefore, if there are very specific pedagogic reasons why something has to be handed out, then we probably do need to risk assess that separately, but the general advice is that we shouldn't be handing stuff around.
Thank you. Lisa, I think John's answered your question in relation to the room occupancy. To clarify, room occupancy is for everybody in that room, including teaching staff. We will do I will ask Linda and John to do another assessment of that to make sure that we're clear on all maximum occupancy posters, but the maximum occupancy should be for the entire room, including teachers and students, sorry. Christopher Darville, thank you. Does that mean that HODs should inform Kay or staff should inform Kay themselves? whichever way works, really, in the sense of usually HODs are classed as line managers, but obviously have a very wide span of control as such, so they have many people reporting to them. Usually, obviously, therefore, you should be informing your head of department should you be self-isolating or have a positive test. And also, it's just worth copying me in as well. It's not, as I said, we will hear back from the campus life area anyway for any reported cases of self-isolation or tests, but it's just helpful to copy me in and inform your head of department. And a question, sorry, from Miri Firth. Any updates to on-campus teaching since the SAGE recommendations reported last night for universities? Martin, I'm not sure whether you have any awareness of the latest SAGE updates.
Well, I mean, this is ongoing. The university is following the guidance from SAGE rather than from independent SAGE. I understand that SLT are discussing the way that we respond to the evolving situation and the various tiers the DFE guidance recommends. So I've seen emails this afternoon around defining exactly what we stop doing as we move through the various tiers of the DFE guidance. So that's an evolving situation as the epidemic evolves and as the advice is developing.
Thank you. Julian, I'm not particularly clear on your question there.
Number one of the 5 recommendations from Independent SAGE is to transfer all teaching and learning online by default. Okay. They go on to talk about where that can't happen in cases of lab and practice-based training, and a number of other recommendations. But top of the list is to move online by default. I mean, wherever possible. And I think that's going to come eventually from the government. We all know that it takes the DFE at least a week longer than everybody else to come to the conclusion that this is what's got to happen. I mean, in 3 days, we've gone from me saying in an email, look at what's coming from Scotland, to look at what's coming from MMU, which is within coughing distance of campus. And so I can't imagine why we're waiting, really. I think the decision-making needs to move more locally on the ground. I don't know how much lab work there is in SEED, but I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be going online by default now. That's my opinion.
So, Julian, let me try and respond to that. Clearly, it is possible that that's the direction this might go, if that's where the advice goes. The kind of university position at the moment is that face-to-face teaching is low risk. So face-to-face teaching in masks at 2 metre spacing in well-ventilated rooms. People that should know about this are telling us that that is low risk. All the transmission that we're seeing at the moment is not around face-to-face teaching. So switching to online teaching, may become part of the story, but it's not the kind of immediate challenge that we're facing at the moment. In fact, so I'm on the campus reopening group, and we had a letter from a parent of a student who is locked down in halls, and it made a series of points about support for students in halls and so on, but ended up with a plea not to cancel face-to-face teaching because that's why the students were here in person. So, it's a difficult one. I know that there's a range of views on this, but the current university situation, the current university position is that at the moment we are offering a blended model, and that as the situation changes, we will move through the various tiers of the DFE advice, which ultimately at tier 4 mean moving to the position that you describe, which is closing down all teaching, but that's not where we currently are.
Thank you, Martin. A number of questions or a number of issues in the chat I think are being resolved in relation to the questions as such. Just to clarify, thank you, Lorna. In relation to Christopher's question, just to clarify about reporting a COVID case, yeah, Christopher, sorry if there's any lack of clarity there. You should report to your line manager as such, so who is your HOD, and in most cases anyway is your HOD. So therefore, I just need to encourage everybody to report to their line manager as such, and I can be copied in if necessary, or the HOD can alert me to it. The crucial thing is reporting to your line manager, who will be able to submit the form for you. Again, that will be clear again once we send the slides round, and please take some time to look at the information that's on there. Jen, in relation to your question, will the students receive the information from us or from Central Uni? They're receiving lots of information at the moment, and induction showed that they are confused. I can appreciate that obviously with the amount of information flying around, it is easy to be confused, whether you're staff or a student. Kelly, do you know in relation to how they're receiving the information about reporting their cases?
We've updated the intranet. We've put a kind of out of office on the chat. If it's not on there already, it'll be tomorrow, and we're updating Facebook. But if there's anything else that you think we should do, would you appreciate us sending an email? Because I know some students are getting loads of emails at the moment. What's the best way for us to communicate this to students other than what we've done already? So if anyone's got any ideas, we could put an email together or a newsletter or something. I know Janice does a newsletter, so maybe we could record like the information in there as well. Any ideas?
Thank you, Kelly. I think that's a good point, just to ensure that people just keep communicating with us and letting us know what's happening. If they're communicating with students and they're hearing different messages, then please do let us know, and we'll make sure we get the comms as clear as we possibly can to both staff and students. Karen, wouldn't it make sense to be cautious and stay with all online teaching for the next week or two until we see what the situation is? I think, Martin, you might have covered some of that in your answer with Julian there as well. I don't know whether you might want to add anything else.
Well, it's just a balance of risks, isn't it? Because, if we move to entirely online teaching, then we've got students that, have no reason to leave their halls, and that's not an ideal situation for students to be in either. So, yeah.
And I appreciate, obviously, Karen has also added to that as well. It's not just about the teaching aspects of it. It is about getting onto campus, sometimes with public transport through high-risk areas as well. What we would like to suggest is if people are anxious around those issues, please do continue talking to your line managers about those concerns, and that's on a case-by-case basis. We need to talk to individuals about how they best apply their teaching and best apply their support from a PS perspective as well. We certainly don't want anyone to feel overly anxious about it, so please do continue talking to your line managers. Sorry, Leith, there's lots coming through on the chat, so I'm just trying to keep everything flowing as quickly as possible. Lisa, you need to ask about school-based placements. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks ever so much, Kay. It just something that kind of a little bit of an alarm bell went in my head in relation to Kelly saying that we can't tell students to self-isolate. We're trying to put some guidance together for our trainees, clearly, and I'm assuming other professional courses will be thinking about the same thing, about how we ask our students to communicate with the schools if they are either self-isolating or if they are positive. COVID positive, but I think schools will want to know immediately that we are advising students to self-isolate and following the PHE guidelines. And I just would welcome some clarity on that, because we need to just be really clear that students know, school partners rather, feel confident that our students are being told to self-isolate if they have symptoms and told to self-isolate if they are positive COVID.
Well, I mean, Lisa, yes, they are being told that clearly. I think what Kelly was referring to was if a student says, you know, somebody that I met last week has got COVID, we can't really advise them to self-isolate on the basis of that, because we don't know what the nature of that contact was. And so the advice then has to be to look at the NHS guidance on, do you think you meet any of the NHS criteria around which would lead you to needing to self-isolate. If we have students that are showing symptoms, and particularly that have tested positive, then clearly you know, the NHS guidance is clear on that as well.
Thank you, Martin. I appreciate that's taken up a lot of time and people have a lot of questions, etc. So please do, if we can't get through everything in the chat for this meeting, I do encourage everyone to please keep communicating with us and asking us questions, and we'll keep communications as clear as we possibly can as things keep evolving. I'd like to move on now, if that's okay with everybody, to Laura, just about PGR provision. Laura, because I know you've got to head off quite soon.
Yeah, thank you, Kay. Well, just to say, firstly, we're about to begin our PGR induction, which is welcoming our new students on to the university to SEED, and that is online only. We've developed a series of sessions over a couple of weeks, and they're also accessing sessions through faculty as well. Faculty induction is online too, so that's ongoing. One of the key issues that's emerged for us is about allowing PGR access to desk study space. So many of the PGR in our community want to be able to access their desks, their study space on campus, and that has proved very, very difficult in terms of trying to keep occupancy rates in buildings low. We do have a number of PGR who are accessing as high priority students where we recognise that there is a real need for them to be able to access that study space, and we've implemented processes for that. And then I think one of the questions that came in offline before the meeting was asking about the extension process. So just bear with me to find the question.
Laura, I can read it out for you if you'd like.
Oh, that'd be great, Lorna, thank you.
Yeah, so is it still possible for PGRs to get an unconditional 3-month extension, regardless if they've not applied to or not received one?
Right, yeah, so it was never possible for that to happen. And indeed, this was an issue that was taken up fairly early when the pandemic first hit, around about March, April, May time. There was an open letter from the PGR to the Manchester Doctoral College asking about this. I mean, as I understand it, the reasons around this are because we really need to look at each PGR situation and their project and their circumstances on a case-by-case basis to ensure that any kind of extension and support that we put in place meets the needs of that particular student or that particular postgraduate researcher. So, you know, the requirements of one PGR compared to another would be quite different. So we've really tried to work with our PGR who are making those applications to make sure that they get the support that they need, whether that's financial support, wellbeing support, etc., to provide that and to make sure that they feel that they've got that. It's not easy, and in some cases there's financial obligations, and our faculty have been involved in approving applications that have financial obligations with them. But yeah, we've really tried to work, and if there are PGR who feel anxious about the special permission process and the application forms for extensions, then the DCOs and myself are more than willing to work with them, to talk with them about those applications, to help support them through that process. And also I'd just like to express my thanks to the PS team, and particularly to Liam, who's had to deal with an enormous, expanded a number of special permission applications this year. I think we've had about 60 compared to what we normally have, around 10 applications. So it has been a massive workload issue for us as well. So a big thank you to Liam as well. I think that's about it, Kay. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks very much. Just very quickly, I'm not sure how much of an update. I don't think we got any specific questions in relation to research, but Noel, I think you're with us, as is Sarah as well. I'm just wondering whether you would like to provide any particular update. I don't want to put you on the spot there, but feel free.
Oh, hi everyone. Hi, nice to see you all. Yeah, there's a few quick things to say. I'm going to say 5 things very, very briefly. I mean, the context, of course, is that because we've got a huge emphasis on teaching and learning in the last few months, we're aware of loss of time for research. We're aware of loss of opportunity for research. And if we're not already, certainly by the end of the coming semester and the year ahead, we're going to be itching to get back to research. So I think that's pretty clear. In that context, 2 bits of good news. I mean, the pandemic hasn't slowed us down in 2 areas. So firstly, we're really well prepared for the REF. The deadline for the REF next year has been pushed back to March 2021. Our preparations are undiminished. I think we're going to put in the best submissions we can by the end of January next year. Secondly, on applications and awards, again, it's just amazing the throughput of applications through the summer, and we've had some big awards come through. People like Richard Kingston, Diana Mitlin, and some others. Thirdly, we don't yet have a research budget for the year ahead, but we hope we're going to have one soon. It's going to be smaller than usual, but there will, we hope, be some money there to do some things in the research space. Fourthly, at the moment, the faculty is very keen to find out the impact of the pandemic on research activity. And I think what's behind that is that in the next year or 2, there will be a moderation of what we can reasonably be expected to achieve as researchers, and I think that's very welcome. And then finally, research support. Obviously, we've had the VS scheme, which, it's not a nice thing to have to lose colleagues. But our school research support team, is essentially there intact. So we've got Mel Cannon, Michael Livesey, Rakesh Verma, Carla Chadwick, and Steve Ride. And there's more, I think, collaboration across the schools at the moment. So I'm hoping in the months ahead we don't feel any loss of service when we're applying for grants and so on and so forth. So there was one question, Kay, that was before the meeting, which was, I think, is there a chance we're going to get back the lost research time from this year and the year to come in the following year? I think it's unlikely we'll get that time back, and I think that's going to be true across the UK. I think, though, we're looking to move towards getting a better balance between teaching and learning time, focused time, and research time. So how's that going to happen? Well, unfortunately, at the moment, the faculty is not considering allowing the sabbaticals to go ahead. So I think for now, we just have to rule that out. Secondly, the HODs and the deputy heads can make local workload adjustments, but that's going to be very context specific. Thirdly, as I said, I think we all have to moderate our expectations of what we can reasonably achieve in the research space in the next while, and I think that's very reasonable. And I guess the final thing to say is that a lot of people have really altered what they do as researchers. A lot of desk-based activity. Not everyone can adapt in that way, but I think many of us have managed to do that. So I know, for example, a few people this semester are going to focus on preparing grants for next year, rather than going out in the field and doing the field work that they plan. So I probably can't say much more than that. Thanks.
Thank you, Noel.
Noel, can I just chip in there? So Noel talked about potentially reduced research budgets for this year, and as you know, kind of financially, everything's been kind of cut to the bone and on hold over the summer whilst we figure out what position we might be in the fall. As you know, undergraduate recruitment looks pretty good. Postgraduate recruitment looks pretty good as well, although we need to be a month down the line before we really know whether those students will show up. But I guess I'm cautiously optimistic that the financial situation won't be anything like as bad as we thought it might be, and in that situation I'll be pressing to reinstate our research spending as a priority, so that whilst we may not be able to get back the time that we've lost to the epidemic in terms of research, we might at least be able to hit the ground running once we can get going again.
Thank you, Martin. I'm conscious of Laura's time, and there's a question that's just come into the chat for Laura from Alfredo Stein about what about school and university ethical approval processes for PGR students if their research is outside the UK?
Yeah, I was just trying to find the right guidance on the frequently asked questions. I think from memory, and Noel might be able to correct me on this, the same kind of guidelines around research ethics apply to PGR as they do to staff research. There are some circumstances where face-to-face research, well, I think firstly it depends on whether there's face-to-face research in play or not. And I think also it depends on whether the PGR is actually located in that country currently. And then also it depends on the local guidelines that are in operation in that country also. So there is an ethics process to go through, and if the PGR already has ethical approval, then there'll be amendments to that to accommodate the changing situation regarding the pandemic. But I think it's in quite limited kind of circumstances that kind of research can happen. I don't know if you can add to that, Noel.
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. We've had very few applications to do face-to-face research since the pandemic started. But to give you an example where it doesn't work, we've got one student who wanted to go back home, but really also to do research. So if you can't travel as a university who wants to do research overseas to a place where current restrictions apply and attempt to do research. If you're already there, as Laura said, that might be a different story, but it's highly context specific. And when people apply, they've got to really get the detail right so that the assessors of the risk and the ethics components of this really understand the situation. If the situation changes, the student or the academic has to update the university on what's going on. So it's fiddly, really fiddly.
Thank you, Noel. Another question from in the research area, but I think it's probably targeted to Martin, but Noel, you might want to add into this as well. From Jenna Mittelmeier, how will reduced research opportunities and capacity be accounted for in probation and promotion reviews in the coming years?
So I think we sent a message about this in kind of April or May, and I'll reiterate that the School Promotions and Probation Committee will explicitly take account of the situation that's evolved over the past 6 months and probably the next 6 months as well. That may mean that we have different types of research or different amounts of research that have been undertaken, but it'll also mean that colleagues have the opportunity to demonstrate, great kind of inputs on the teaching side, and everything that everybody's been doing over this summer will be recognised as well. So, please be reassured that Promotion and Probation Committee will have this at the top of their agenda when considering cases this year.
Thank you, Martin. I'd like to just hand over now to David for the teaching and learning update.
Okay, I'll keep this very brief because you've heard a lot from me recently, and as Martin has said, the situation is moving very quickly, so we're just trying to add some certainty to the uncertainty, and I will try and provide a further set of frequently asked questions towards the end of the week, because there's a lot happening at the moment, and even today and this afternoon things have changed. I just want to update you on a few points. One is that we will hopefully be confirming that semester 2 will be online for lectures, with the option of blended or studying remotely being extended into the second semester, but we're waiting for final confirmation of that. Also, the information on the tiers and what the tiers do, and also the triggers for the tiers, that's something I'm trying to push for there to be clarity, because we need to know both how we are going to escalate the situation that we're in, and also how we come out of this situation. So I believe that is being discussed this afternoon, and information on that will be coming out. Just in relation to academic advising, we've made a decision to make academic advising by default online, and we'll provide an update on that process. However, if people feel they need to have academic advising on campus, then we'll clarify how you can do that. The issue of student conduct has been raised a number of times, and that will be further clarified. We're waiting for guidance from the university to just stipulate exactly what the expectations are, but students are completing health and safety requirements in terms of on-campus conduct in relation to that. And then there will be a survey after 3 weeks for students just to see how they are doing. In regards of questions, I got one specific question which was related to China and the issue of surveillance of students and how we deal with lectures to students dealing with sensitive issues. We are taking advice from the British Association of Chinese Students, and that will be circulated, but the university is also taking legal advice on what can or what we should be doing in that situation. At the moment, I think we all have to deal with that sensitively, and I'd appreciate if people think that there are issues to do with their programs that are going to cause problems, if you could draw that to my attention so I can pass that on to faculty as soon as possible. But I think one of the issues related to any online activity now is that we all have to be sensitive to what either is recorded, and again, further guidance will be coming out in a moment, as soon as we can, but also how we conduct ourselves and how students conduct themselves in this space. And again, it's a bit of a cliche, but more guidance is coming out in relation to that. So that's it from me at the moment.
Thank you, David. One very final brief update from me. There were a number of questions, I think, in relation to IT service and particularly from the GIS team, the working group in relation to remote logins and Citrix, the new Citrix system. So I met with Chris Sharples this morning about a number of IT issues. What I will do is I'll get in touch with the GIS team separately, and Jonathan Lilly, I know, has been voicing their concerns to IT. So I don't want to get into too much detail on that for the rest of this meeting. But just to remind people as well, and I'm sure I'll be inundated with responses now, if you are feeling as though there are IT issues that aren't being listened to, very aware of the IT help desk delays at the moment. So please do let me know, or do feed that through to Seed School Office, and I will keep in dialogue with Chris Sharples to try and keep IT delivering the best service they can under these demanding circumstances at the moment. What I will do now is hand over to Martin, I think, for any other business.
Sorry, I'm muted. Rookie error. You think I'd have got the hang of that by now. We've got 10 minutes left, so we can take questions on anything and everything if there are other issues. I guess the one thing I would just re-emphasize is that this is all still changing. You know, as Julian and Karen identified, it's a very fast-moving situation in terms of the epidemic as well. I expect that in the next few days we will see more from the government and more from the university in terms of the nature of what we are planning to provide and how that will evolve under various kind of future scenarios of you know, whether the cases are going up or down, or you know, where those infections are coming from. Okay.
Thank you, Martin. Do you want me to read out the questions from the chat? A couple for David, actually. One from Alfredo. Will the guidance include which system, i.e. Zoom or Teams, will be used regarding places like China?
I don't know if it will be specifically about that, but if that's a question that we need to pass on, because we've been dealing with the technical issue of Zoom and Teams previously. But if there's a security issue around those, then can you just pass that on so I can follow that up? And then just in terms of Miriam's question, what I would expect is that the tiers will be explicit on the amount of hours. So semester 2, who knows what tier we'll be at, but I would imagine that would be linked to the tiers and the expected amount of hours teaching that we'll be involved with.
Yeah, David, the British Association of Chinese Studies advice, which is what David referred to, that he will circulate later, does discuss the issue of Zoom versus other methods of teaching online. So I think that will be part of what I emailed Fiona Smith to ask her to consider this. So I hope we will get some guidance on what is most appropriate. The British Association of Chinese Studies suggests Zoom might not be the best media for doing this work.
Okay. Thank you, Martin. A question actually, or I think Thomas would like to ask a question actually about the school board. Thomas, we can put you on spotlight if you'd like to ask the question of everyone here.
Hello, gang. So we've been the secretary for the dean has been in touch and asked if we would like to have the dean come to the next school board to answer questions. This would be in addition to his annual visit, where he does a kind of retrospective and a looking forwards. And I've got a few other things that are going to happen on the agenda around kind of updates from faculty committee and Senate and that kind of stuff. I just wondered if colleagues would be interested in having the dean come to the school board so they could ask him questions directly. A show of hands, perhaps. And if you open the press the participants button at the bottom, you can click. Actually, no, there's a yes or a no, right? So do we want to talk to the dean at the school board is my question, right? So if you click participants, there's a green tick for yes, and there's a red X for no, and no one's holding it against anybody, but just give that 20 seconds to percolate. But the overwhelming impression I get there is that more dean is a good thing. So there's
be careful.
Sure. So let's do that. Let's have him come and great. Thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to ask the question.
Thanks, Thomas. Thank you. There's a question from Gail actually in relation to Chinese students and can they use the remote login to computer clusters for practical classes? Has this been tested by IT services? I think that's a perfect question for me to take to Chris Sharples and see whether we can get that response to that, Gail. I wouldn't know myself an answer to that, but I'm sure we can find that out relatively quickly for you. And if they can't, then something needs to be done about it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think we have to assume the answer to that question is yes. If it's no, we've got a serious problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, does anyone else have any more questions? We've got a couple of minutes left. It would be great if please do feel free to let us know, or anyone if you want to specifically ask a question as well and show your blue hand, we can spotlight you.
Perhaps I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but this is very fast moving. Everybody's working very hard on this. We need your input. Please keep communicating with heads of department, with program directors, with the school leadership team, with Kay and I. Ask questions. Tell us what you're thinking. Let's try and keep all the lines of communication open here, because if we think it's fast moving now, once we start teaching in earnest next week and beyond, despite how much work gone into trying to think through every eventuality. Things will come up, and we'll deal with them as we go along.
We have two raised hands actually, Martin, one from Jacko, and then we'll follow with Alfredo.
Jacko.
Thanks. I think my question is probably directed towards David. So, as we understand, regulation students should have the opportunity to come onto campus for 2 hours. So the question in that regard is, we've been talking at program committee level and found that it probably requires some coordination. Otherwise, everybody tried to get their students on campus for 2 hours, or nobody tried to get students on campus for 2 hours. Just a response there would be great. Perhaps more pressing is this: since some of our programs are really heavy with students that might not come, particularly from Asia and from China, timetabling has become quite a bit of a problem because of decent hours to engage with them. So essentially only morning slots would work for people that's 8 hours ahead of the time. And so my question there is this been considered perhaps to open up the timetable to a little bit earlier, maybe 8 or even earlier in the morning, in order for us to get more slots so that the student can have his online sessions with lecturers at some point during the week, during a decent hour. Thank you.
Okay, Jack, I'll take the second one first. In terms of the timetable, if there are specific timetable issues like that, then bring them to the attention of Kelly, because we're trying to resolve those as quickly as possible. We have had conversations with individuals about the timetable with regards to international students, because they knew that they were going to have that situation. And again, if you've got intelligence of your area in relation to they need a different start time, then discuss that. At the moment, you may have picked up that we've avoided using very early in the morning, very late at night. It was on the cards along with weekends at one stage, just trying to pack everything into a very congested timetable. So we've managed to avoid that. But if there's a specific request, then we can look at that. So I didn't quite understand the first part of the question. Can you just ask that again? About the 2 hours.
The first part was, so our understanding is that students are guaranteed to have their 2 hours on campus for, during the course of a week. But of course, it needs to be coordinated between all the different course units that a student is partaking in. Otherwise, the students may be required to be on campus or have the opportunity to be on campus 5 times or 4 times, or it may happen that nobody is willing to do that or think everybody else is going to do that. So is there been something said about that? Is there any guidance, or is it simple a case that we need to wake up at program committee level and coordinate that, or do we leave it to chance?
Yeah, so again, my understanding is that is coordinated at a program level, and that's where it will be decided in terms of the most efficient and impact in terms of what's happening and who is actually doing it. But then it's also recorded on the, is it Syllabus Plus, or certainly on the timetable, because that's how we're monitoring who's on campus. Because the other side of it is we need to know who's on campus and when, so we can keep the occupancy around 30% maximum.
Okay, we've got one more question from Alfredo, and then I think we probably need to wrap up. Alfredo.
Yeah, this is like a general comment, Martin. I think that the issue that you have as a team, and all of us have, is the following: there are certain things that we can control within SEAT, it's the spaces, etc. But the students are not living within the SEAT compounds. They're living in dorms, they're living all over the city, they travel from the city to campus, etc. So I think that many of their uncertainties will not take place because we have control over the buildings, etc. It's what happens outside the university. And I don't know how you're managing this.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Alfredo. And, to date, of the cases that have occurred on campus, my understanding is that all of those have been brought onto campus. They haven't been transmitted on campus. So that is the challenge that we're dealing with. But I guess that's the challenge that we're all dealing with in everyday life. It's perhaps just worth very briefly saying that the university is doing a lot in the halls, both to help the students to stay safe within the halls and also to support students who have to isolate within the halls. So I think a lot of lessons have been learned from the experience at MMU down the road last week, and our students, if they are asked to self-isolate, will get packages of food and sanitary items, they'll get laundry, they'll get people checking in on them. So there's a lot going on in the halls to try and make the halls a safe space as well, to help try and limit transmission by those methods as well. But you're right, Alfred. I mean, it's out there in the real world. Every time we go to the supermarket, we have to be careful, and that's the message that we have to get across to our students. And I think collectively, all of us and all of our students, it's about continually reinforcing safe behaviours in any space that we're in, and just keeping that message going. Okay, we're running out of time, so I'm going to wrap up. Just before everybody goes, one thing I'd like to do is, you'll have noticed that both Noel, as the outgoing Director of Research, is with us today, and Sarah Linley, who we welcome as our incoming Director of Research, are on this call. Noel's leave of absence to pursue some research opportunities in Australia begins on Thursday or Friday. So just like to take this opportunity to thank Noel for everything that he's done, and to welcome Sarah, who'll be picking up the reins from next week. Okay, thanks everybody, thanks for your time. Good luck next week. Keep talking to us, keep talking to each other, and let's hope that things improve in the national situation. We will continue to do this if it's useful. So if you think these meetings are worthwhile, please let us know in the chat, or drop us an email, or whatever's appropriate. Thanks all.